this pride, this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that you've been sold, but no one actually really knows what that pot of gold is. Everyone talks about it, but no one says what it is. And I don't think anyone's ever actually found it.
Men, you are going to have misogynistic thoughts probably, but they're just thoughts. Let them go.
I think the man box that, is referenced throughout some of these articles and is discussed in the study is really important and profound because I think it holds the nuance of what patriarchy really does to men in the sense that, yes, it deeply, deeply harms them and hurts them and keeps them imprisoned and trapped by these ideals that are unfair, that they can't show emotion, that they must protect and provide and conquer and dominate. But at the same time, it also uplifts them and empowers them and allows men privilege in our society. And it is this double-edged sword of, when you are on top, what do you have to do to stay on top? And I think ultimately it goes back to that fear of losing something. It's all about us, and it's time to bow down. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bow Down. Of course, we are back here for another episode with me, Reese, and Dennis. Dennis, as always, so lovely to see you, and I'm excited to be chatting today. We're going to dive into the recent the state of UK men study that just came out. And of course, there's been a few articles published on it, but I'm glad we have our resident statistician to actually be able to analyze the stats of this and the kind of statistical method that went behind it. So I feel like we have an edge on discussing some of these stats too. And then of course we'll dive into the larger implications, but I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. This is I don't know if we'll get to everything here. And yeah,
Of
the
course.
statistician, there's a lot of data, and be careful. We'll be careful, hopefully, not to bog down things by just being a fact book here. We don't need to be an almanac, but there's definitely some really interesting things, I think, that
Yeah.
we can chat about, and I think it touches upon a lot of the stuff we've talked about, we've hinted at, we've uh, gone it's the story of Rashomon, right? We've touched the elephant in a
Yeah.
bunch of different places, but I think this is another viewpoint, and very good to just explore a little bit.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I first found this, I found it through a TikTok with Jamal Berkmar, I believe is his name. He was referencing another creator whose name is now leaving my mind, but I'll link both of them below because they just had really insightful things to say about it, specifically in relationship to the male loneliness epidemic that we keep hearing about. And one thing that Jamal Berkmar said in his video was, men, even if you are lonely, you need to realize why, and that we don't feel bad for you because of things like this that are being expressed in the articles. So I found that really insightful, that it's in order to feel bad for someone, of course, anyone having negative emotions or feelings or going through a hard time, there's a natural human sympathy that comes there. However, I think there's also the natural human, did you make this bed? And are you now lying in it? So, yeah, I guess I'll toss it over to you because I haven't read through the official study, just a few of the articles. But Dennis, as a man, what stats first popped out to you as whoa, this is
Yeah,
prescient?
yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of themes that resonated for me, and I think will be interesting to get your take on them, especially as we dive a little bit deeper into the data. I think the first is so the first thing that really jumped out at me was this there's a real conflict between what a man is in terms of sort of thought versus, or what they say, or, what the ideal is versus what really happens in practice, I think. And I guess you might call this conflicting masculinity norms in some senses. So what does it mean to be a man? And um there's a suggestion in my view that the roles of men are definitely moving past the old stereotypes. However, it's also a case of old habits die hard. Kind of traditional expectations are lingering. What was interesting was, friendship, caring, and integrity were definitely on the top of the list in terms of masculine ideals. Like, what does it mean to be a man? Well, friendship, caring, integrity, very, very high. In fact, outranking what you might traditionally think toughness or dominance. That said, it's a yes and. So yes, I mean, at least in terms of thoughts, it seems overall we're shifting a little bit. But the report also confirms this influence of we call the man box, this
Hmm.
rigid code of toughness, stoicism, and dominance. Um, and so yeah, I thought that was very interesting because it's like these old norms are both a prison as well as a place of safety, it seems, for some men. And, it's like that old picture of with a cage with just a couple of bars, and why don't you let me out?
Yeah.
um because when you adhere to these old norms, this toughness, right, this dominance, this rigid code of stoicism, right? I mean, stoicism is a great, and there's a ton of like being a stoic videos on YouTube, which I actually, as a top, we could and I watched some of them, and they're very interesting. And I see why, even in watching them, I see why they work, like why
Right.
men fall for these, because I can see myself falling for them as well. Like, just, especially when if you're seeking connection, you're seeking or seeking a relationship, or just want to get laid. I don't know, mate, perhaps, but um, and again, listen, no shame on any of these. These are all valid human wants and desires. But yeah, I think that so anyway, there is a unsurprisingly, and really maybe good for me in my profession, or bad, I guess, depending on how you look at it. I, these old norms can give a sense of purpose, but they come at a very high cost from a mental health perspective. And so that, I think, like everything else in life, shows the paradox. Men tend to celebrate friendship and community in theory. Sort of
Right.
like in theory, communism works, right? But
Yeah.
in practice, they don't feel safe, I will say, handling problems within community. They still feel they need to handle their problems themselves. Is kind of and so again, it's that stoic, I can handle this, I am a rock, I am an island, that I think is very attractive. And it's also, it is both the safety and a place of safety, a refuge, but it is also a prison.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of stats I could share, but I want to just stop there and get your thoughts just even on
Yeah.
that first part.
I think the man box that, the is referenced throughout some of these articles and is discussed in the study is really important and profound because I think it holds the nuance of what patriarchy really does to men in the sense that, yes, it deeply, deeply harms them and hurts them and keeps them imprisoned and trapped by these ideals that are unfair, that they can't show emotion, that they must um, protect and provide and conquer and dominate. But at the same time, it also uplifts them and empowers them and allows men privilege in our society. And it is this double edged sword of, when you are on top, what do you have to do to stay on top? Um, and I think ultimately it goes back to that like fear of losing something. I actually heard something the other day. Oh, you know what? It is in this article. Sorry, lost my train of thought. But when I read this, I thought that it was just so important that said, I'm forgetting exactly what the statistic is, but that a large portion of men viewed feminism and movements toward equality as a deficit to them. That because they have, like, if you have 80%, well, yeah, going to 50% means I'm being hurt and harmed. But actually, what people are trying to say is, don't you see, though? You're not at 80% because of this man box, because of all of these other things, and other people being raised up, like rising tide lifts all boats, is actually going to be mutually beneficial and symbiotic for our entire culture and society. But I found that one really important when I was reading it, that it is like that. I think gives a lot of insight into the underlying fear that a lot of men have in regards to like progressive social movements, and a reason why they don't want to look at it and they don't want to be allies and activists is because it challenges this thing that they've been told makes them safe. Well, I think the answer, at least part of the answer, would be that isn't real safety and security, and we need to start developing safety and security in another realm. So then you can look at these ways that you can uplift oppressed and repressed groups. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's so. And yeah, it is from the report. You're right. In
Okay,
particular,
good.
talking, I think about the lure of the manosphere. You know,
Yeah,
the ultra masculine, and how over half the actual statistic that I think you were referring to, over half of the men in the survey essentially felt that feminism was about favoring women over men. And you know, almost over 2/3 felt that men need to be more respected in society. So, and I think a lot of that, and maybe I'll touch more upon that as well. But yeah, I think that's great thoughts. I mean, just some interesting. So here's something interesting. I mean, so 91% of men and women said that being a friend is defining is a defining quality of manhood. Oh, so that's 9 out of 10. I mean, that's a lot. That's a huge. So care, loyalty, showing up for others, do at least in on paper or in the
right,
mouth of people, are seen as core masculine virtues. Um, honesty, kindness, helping those in need, giving advice, all valued. Now, is this the sort of thing though that like the survey? Again, I don't know the exact survey question. I mean, it's like, do you like puppies? Like, hey,
right,
99% of people wouldn't kill a puppy given the chance. You can spin some.
right.
And I can't say I looked through every single question. I didn't, try
Sure.
to test the validity of their survey methodology. Like this, I'm not in that role anymore. But so let's take this at face value. But but what this indicates to me is the move away from the lone wolf. It at least in theory. But to your point, is it really bleeding over into life? Also, interestingly, because we talk a lot about um roles, right? Like gender roles, particularly roles at home, and 88%, so almost 9 out of 10, felt that being a provider was a value for them, which it makes sense. I mean, that's a very masculine trait, like being a provider. So 9 out of 10. I mean, frankly, that to me is even low. I would feel like 95% plus of men would feel that way. So that makes sense to me. But here's what was very interesting: 83%. So basically, 5 out of 6. That's 83%. Is 5 out of 6 feel that sharing housework and childcare with a partner also defines manhood. But that's an interesting statistic to me, because I bet if we polled 5 out of 6 women in relationships, in marriages, did they feel that their husband did the share the housework and child work equally? I don't think
Right.
5 out of 6 would say yes. So there's clearly a gap there, at least. I mean, maybe I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but maybe there's a vocal minority whose men are louses, but that's certainly not the story I've been told. So again, is
Right.
it thoughts? Hey, in theory, yeah, of course I'd want. And again, it could be the way the question's held. Asked, hey, should a man, is it a good thing for a man to help around the house? I mean, again, I do feel like 5 out of 6 men are going to say yes, to that
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
question. Versus, so again, but again, this is a shift towards nurturing masculinity, at
Which I
least on
think
paper. which is
even in
positive.
paper is a positive thing to note. And of course, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and we can talk about intent versus impact all day, but I do want to acknowledge like a shift in general thought consensus, or at least having some shame in reporting not having that sentiment. You know what I mean? That it's like, oh, well, I know that I probably should want to share some of this at the bare minimum. Is, even though that may not be exactly what you want in a partner, to feel just like shamed into doing this thing that is like societally considered good. I think there are certain societal goods that, like, when something is looked unfavorably upon, it's like that will shape behavior. And I do agree with you that it's like, well, that's positive movement, at least in the mental real estate. But one thing that is coming up for me, because, you know, you mentioned stoicism a little bit earlier, and that has been like a weird bee in my bonnet for a really long time, because I think stoicism as an actual philosophy is really beautiful. And if you read the original Stoics, like, it is very much about living in accordance with nature and nature's cycles, which, even just saying that, sounds very feminine, right? Like it has this divine feminine quality to it. And it has been so maligned by these manosphere red pill spaces to be about like um non-reactivity and repression of emotions and feelings and reactions, and uh really not what, in my opinion, you know, of course I did study philosophy, but you know, it's just one philosopher's analysis, so take it for what it's worth. That it's just such an incorrect analysis. And I'm like, please go read the Stoics, go read Marcus Aurelius. Like, these are really beautiful works. And also, I think it's important to look at the cultural movement that different philosophies come out of as well. And when we're looking at the ancient Greek society and the status of what the definition of man meant then is really interesting. All of that to say, I think there's a problem with definition that is also coming up. Like, what does Stoicism actually mean? It's shifted very heavily in how we use it and what it originally meant, and maybe means in a more quote unquote true philosophical sense versus a video essay on YouTube, you know? And I'm feeling the same thing with the word provider, right? That 88% of men feel this need to be a provider. And I think on its face, of course, like, I think any individual, regardless of gender, um, wants to take care of those that they love. One, I think it's a psychological human um inclination, right? Take care of your tribe. That's better for you. It's safety and security. But also, when you love someone, when you care about them, I think there is this natural, like, you want to nurture them, you want to protect them, you want to shield them from life's hurts and harms. But I wonder how provider is interpreted, because I could absolutely see provider being interpreted as being the breadwinner, and that being divided just solely down the traditional gender norm lines. But I'm like, who is actually the primary provider for a family when childcare is involved? Again, typically, generalization, women. But they're not called providers. Is provider just linked to finances? Like providing food,
Mm.
providing care, cooking, car,
Emotional nourishment. Like,
emotional nourishment. There's so many ways to provide
exactly.
for
Yeah.
people. You can provide anything. So that's another thing that's coming up for me is like, great, what do these words actually mean in how we use them? And I would imagine that different people have different um, definitions there. And I think that that's important to, not necessarily in the sake of the study, but like tease out in how we think about these concepts.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, and I suspect that at least when, you know, to men, if you say provider, that's synonymous with breadwinner. Like I
Right.
bring home, like men are not thinking, oh well, yes, I provide the emotional nourishment for my family. And maybe women should be taking that up. Yeah, I am the provider. I'm the provider. Actually, in some senses, like I think you make such a great point there. Like, oh, your husband's the provider. Well, he provides money sometimes, but I'm the provider of emotional nourishment. I'm the provider of all of these other. I'm the provider of lunches. I'm the provider of dinner.
Right.
Whatever. I'm the provider of clean clothes. I'm the provider of
Well,
all of
invisible
these things, right?
labor, right? Like we could definitely go there too, which of course there's been so many great conversations around, but I'll never forget this podcast doesn't exist anymore, but it used to be based on a news column in the Wall Street Journal, I want to say, called Dear Sugar, and it was just an advice column, and there was a podcast that came out of it that was really so lovely. And they interviewed someone and about invisible labor, and the thing that came out of it was this idea that typically, like, men will ask women, like, well, what do you need from me, what do you need from me to feel supported? And the list is just in the woman's mind of like they're actually holding all this mental burden and energy of the moving parts. And the thing that has stuck with me is I am the list. Like in your family, typically again, generalization, but it's like woman is like, there is no list, I am the list. And that's the invisible burden that's being carried, and it's like, what do you provide? The glue keeping this machine running, baby, that like no one, it's not written down anywhere. It's just this
Institutional knowledge in some
yes,
senses. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. But sorry, I totally cut you off in the middle. I thought it was going to be a quick thing, but it wasn't.
No,
Um,
no, no cutting me off. I think that's such a salient point. Yeah. Um, so a couple more things in terms of this just sort of high level. So here's an interesting thing. So in terms of violence, so casual sexual conquests and violence ranked among the least identified markers of manhood. So, I mean,
mm,
which is good. I mean, full
right.
stop. Most men do not see violence as inherent to being a man. However, and here's where I think we need to be careful is that there's a troubling minority remains. So over a third of men and over a quarter of women still said that managing conflict with violence is part of being a man today. So while yes, to me the headline could oh, most men don't think, but I think to me the headline is 1 out of 3 men, and even perhaps worse or more, not worse but more disturbingly, 1 out of 4 women believe that violence is inherent to being a man. A man. So 1 out of 4 women believe that in this survey. So it's not just, I mean, yes, slightly more men do, sure. I mean, 75% more men do, in fact, I guess, but uh still, that's a huge number
Yeah.
of women too. So I don't know, what are you just hearing that? Does anything there surprise you? Like what's surprising, what's not surprising, thoughts?
Yeah. Honestly, I think because the hard thing for me with that is like, how would I actually answer that question? Because if someone said, in your mind, the true definition of man, the true definition of masculinity, does that involve violence, like in this ideal world? And I would say absolutely not. Like, that is not how we define manhood, masculinity at all. How is manhood currently societally defined? Does it involve violence? I might answer yes, so I think part of it for me is like, well, what are we measuring the definition based on? Like what is currently socially accepted as kind of the norm, or what we are moving towards? And it's probably a mix of both based on how people are interpreting and answering here, right? And I would honestly probably my logic tells me that the women who answer yes, violence is a part of manhood have probably been subject to a lot of violence from a lot of men and have not had a lot of positive experiences with men that are unviolent. And what are those women supposed to think? Right? It's like, well, my dad was an asshole who only yelled at me and told me to suck it up and uh, used corporal punishment. My brother was my bully in school. My uncles all cheated on their wives. One of them may have sexually abused you, right? Like all of these things. And then you have a bad first boyfriend too. Like that's not as uncommon as I think people may think. And therefore, like, well, how else are you supposed to define it? Like words change their meaning through how we use them, and how we use them is directly related to how we experience them and what that word is linked to. And if it's linked to violence in your experience, you're going to define it on violence. However, I think there is also the scary part of like that number should be zero, right? Like manhood and masculinity being linked to violence should be zero. And knowing that men are the perpetrators of violence in the framing of this question, and also typically in society, it's disheartening to hear that a third of men think that that's a part of manhood. And again, some of those men may be smaller guys or guys that have never felt strong and powerful and were bullied by like the big beefy quarterback or whatever. And it's like, well, I've never been looked at as a real man. And the men who look like they're the real men who, you know, are the cool guys or got laid or whatever are more masculine, are more meatheady, are more aggressive. So maybe that is masculinity. I actually think there's a lot of people's negative experiences that could be hidden variables here. I would really like to think no men are answering yes to that question because they're like, no, I think I need to punch someone to be a man. I'm sure there are those people that are answering this survey with that thought. And I'm sure that there are some women that still think like, no, if a guy like makes a pass at me at the bar, I want you to take him outside or whatever. Like those people exist. But I think there's probably a lot going on there by both men and women being, again, victims of this thought cloud around the man box.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually, a lot of things came up for me as you were uh, going through that, because my first thought was actually that I actually think that number is low. I actually think it's actually probably
Mm,
50% or more of men, and probably over a third of women feel that way. Um, Partially for what now I hadn't really even thought about what you said. I think was so powerful to remember that for both men and women, there are many instances of growing up under violence where, and you can see that if you're in an abusive home, maybe your brother was your protector if you were a woman. So yes, you're going to think that a man's job is to be, is to be a protector. Because,
yeah.
or you didn't have a protector, so you want a man to be a protector. Or so it could be that, yeah, your father was violent, and therefore men are violent, and so that's a natural. Could be your brother was a protector, but the same thing could be true for men as well. Like their
Yeah,
father was violent, and the only way out was more violence. So again, that's what they know.
absolutely.
So those two are very good points. I also feel there is this just inherent in our DNA. Men are bigger and stronger, and for many
Mm-hmm.
years they were the protectors. That you wanted physical violence, you had a man around to beat shit up, because the world was a very violent place. Like anything could kill you at any time. And yeah, we live in our fancy houses and we have chat GTP, and we're civilized because we drink our scotch with ice, but we're not that far removed from caveman days, from
Right.
an evolutionary perspective. So and here is my evidence for my statement, though, in terms of it's more than we think. I just go by the preponderance of women who have 6 foot plus on their profiles, because I mean, you can say, oh yeah, I like tall guys, but why do you like tall guys? I want.
Yeah.
There's a reason you want tall guys. I mean, and again, maybe other people. Maybe there's multiple reasons, but I would argue that the number one survey says the answer on the board is I want a guy who can protect me. Whether you speak that aloud or not, like that is going. I would argue. No, maybe I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I want to hear your thoughts because I'm a guy saying this, but that that evidence to me, the very fact that so many women do put on their profiles, and I don't know what percentage it is, but it's definitely, I think, at least I read about it enough on Reddit since I don't experience it
Yeah.
myself. That now, again, it could be the van is always at the corner. But what are your thoughts on that? Like,
Yeah.
does that resonate? What I said?
No, it does, because I think that there are a lot of subconscious, like, biological happenings that go into attraction, right? And part of me is like, now, if we were like a perfectly like therapized and civilized society, would that not be the case? Like, maybe. However, we're not. Like, human beings are inherently flawed and we have the genetics that we have. Now, that doesn't mean that your gut instinct to things is correct. So, I do think that there is something that is like subconsciously and biologically attractive to like a big, strong man that feels like masculine and manly because of that inherent protective quality. Like, and I don't want to say every woman, but I think a lot of women like to feel like small and petite next to their boyfriends, right? Like, I'll say, for in high school, even when I was in great shape in high school, my boyfriend was tall but thin. He was a thin guy. And every now and then in pictures, I would just be like, I look bigger than I am when I'm standing next to you. And it was not a judgment on him at all because he was tall and he was strong. But it was my own insecurity coming out because of that, right?
Yeah, of course.
But I would also flip it and say, why do you have like, are you a boobs guy or an ass guy? Similar thing where it's like, well, that corresponds to this like biological urge to procreate. And like those are features that correspond with fertility, right? Like there are all of these ancestral genetic inheritances that we are contending with. Now, I would also say we've all been handed a deck of cards, genetically, but also in other ways, but in this scenario, genetically. That does not mean you let your subconscious automatic processing go. And I think racism is actually a really great example of this, right? Like, human beings are wired to see things that look different as dangerous.
Mhm.
And that is why a lot of people, in addition to, of course, all of the socialization and cultural messaging that is very racist, but why a lot of people still have internalized racism. And why the work of being an anti-racist is so important, especially for white people, because you're preloaded. You're preloaded with this stuff, nature and nurture. And we know that, like, but that doesn't make it right. That means we need to understand that and actively work against it, because it's wrong to judge someone based on the color of their skin. And I would kind of say the same thing here, where it's like, yeah, it's okay to have a gut response to something, but you acknowledge it, and then with your prefrontal cortex, not the little lizard part of your not pineal gland, but hippocampus or whatever else is back there that's doing all of the lizard brain stuff. We have evolved past that, literally, in our brain capacity to be able to bring those subconscious gut instincts into the forefront of mind, into conscious awareness, and choose a different path based on our ethics and values. And now, as a society, our ethics and values of protection and providing look very different because we live in very different ways than when those genetics might have served you, right? Back in the day, that partnering with a 5-foot man may have been death of your kids, right? Of course, extreme example. But now it's like, that's not true. Like men aren't going to war and, well, of course men are still going to war. That's not what I meant. But like I hope the messaging that I'm saying is true. Like it's not like every man is out there doing all of these things. Um and I think it's our duty as like aware humans to think about the cards that we have been dealt, the data that we've been preloaded with, and make a decision based in conscious, aware ethics, morals, and values. And I feel lucky that, like, I grew up with a dad who was extremely masculine and manly, but was short. And I've heard him made fun of by other men, like out in public. And it boils my blood. Like nothing makes me more angry. Well, that may not be entirely true, but it really makes me furious because it's like my dad is 3 times the man you would ever be. And I think that that's lucky for me that that has never been a piece of masculinity in my mind. But I can absolutely see why someone who didn't have that nurturing in their experience might still fall back to a biological default.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, a couple of thoughts on that. Number one, and same for racism, right? Like
Right.
we have these energetic channels from our ancestral DNA that run
Yeah.
so deeply. And it's almost like, like I don't know, I was making a PowerPoint or a presentation, I guess I shouldn't say PowerPoint because I was using Canva. But you know how when you get close to the like being even, it'll snap into place. And PowerPoint has this too, where
Mhm.
you get kind of close, or like if you had two magnets, right? Like you bring them closer and closer, and then they snap together, right? That well, I kind of view that energetically, like in our DNA, in our brains, in our thinking, we energetically have these very racist, unsafe path. These this true deep seated, you know ravine that runs if you think of topology, right? Like it is this deep-seated ravine. And pretty much, you can avoid the ravine, but the minute you get close to it, you almost fall. It's like you click into place. So
Yeah.
you can have no bad experiences with a race, and then all of a sudden you have a bad experience, and all of a sudden now you're clicked into that energy of racism. And if you don't know, but what you said was so important, it's about noticing it. Because honestly, you can't stop that. Like, that is, or maybe you can if you get enlightened enough. I don't know, but for the I mean, anything's possible. You can do anything. But in the same way, I do genuinely believe people can probably learn to levitate if they literally spent all have is it something I think I could do? No, because I don't believe enough. But, given my belief system, sure, there's somebody who could totally eliminate racism. But in general, most of us mortals are not going to put the time, energy, and effort into the amount of, transmutation, I guess let's say, that energetic change signature shift would take. So most of us are one incident away from clicking back to our racist, our misogynist, all of these societal things that we decry so much, and that are really baked into our DNA for better or for worse. So that really, I think that explains, and so that's why I think the vigilance is so important.
Yeah.
I think that that's just such a critical piece of recognizing that, you know, we're going to have racist thoughts. We're going, and men, to put it to men, you are going to have misogynistic thoughts probably, but they're just thoughts. Let them go and say,
That's not
I
who
don't.
you
That
are.
no, it might not even be it might not even be yours. Like that's what I want
Right.
people to think. Like these thoughts may not even belong to you in some senses. Like, no, maybe they do. And if they do, then you can work on them because they're your thoughts and you can explore them. However, I would argue for a lot of men, particularly those of us who run on autopilot, these are not even our thoughts. These are not our energy. It's societal energy that clings to us like parasites. Like it's and again, these are the sort of, is this true? Is this not true? It's that's the wrong question. In my view, in terms of, it's not about being true or not true, but it's what can we do about it? And to me, it's
Yeah.
about noticing it. It's about asking when you have a thought like that, to notice it, number one, because we have so many thoughts we don't notice, and then question where it came from. Why? why did I choose to think this? Now, an event happened, I mean, well, oh God, I mean, here's one I am sadly guilty of, and I will admit to doing this, but even now, I still do it sometimes. I'm sad to say, and I have to really correct myself. But if I get cut off in traffic, and my first thought is, "Oh, is that a woman driver?" I do that. I and then if I get if less and less, I will say, like, it's not something I really that really, but in the past, that would yeah, I also used to be a very pissed off driver all the time. Now I'm not. So that's one of that's just part of my overall change. But yeah, that's something very stereotypical. Like, oh, yeah, of course it was a woman driver. And then so I see that little thing, my brain clicks, yep, that's what it was, and I drive on, oh, and maybe mutter under my breath, it's and then, but the fact is half when the other times when it was a man, I don't say any, like, I just, I don't, it doesn't change my viewpoint there. Like, it's not like, oh, well, this time, I just ignore the fact that I saw it was a man. It was just like, I might get pissed or whatever, but again, immediately it's like the van is always at the corner. And
Mm,
I call that out because of how strong these, and they don't really truly belong to us if we really think about it. I don't have a dislike of women drivers by any stretch. Like if I sit there and I think about it and I stop for a second and, like, wait a second, like, I've done I've done stupid driving before. Like, I've been on my phone, like, let he is without sin cast the first stone here. Like, I've cut people off. I've hit curbs, all of I've had accidents before that were my fault. So who am I to fucking sit here and get on my high horse like I'm such a great driver? Fact, my wife has had fewer accidents in her life than me. I think. Maybe. It's been close. Certainly fewer tickets than I've gotten. So who am I to, but you see, when you actually put the facts in front of your brain, I hadn't really thought about that. So this is doing it live, like working through that sort
yeah,
of view
yeah,
a little bit live. But this is genuinely the sort of thing I do with myself
yeah,
at times when I notice something. It's like, God damn it, why did I feel that way? Why did I say that? And then exploring it. And I don't always get an answer, but it's just the very fact that you're sitting there and thinking about it. And women, I'll say that I'll put it back on you with the 6'1" thing, 6 foot or less thing, or no, you be 6 foot or more. Again, what is you're perfectly allowed to do that. And I'm not, there's no judgment because we all have preferences, we all have things. But ask yourself why. Is this really what I want? Or am I limiting myself? Especially if you're not finding the guy of your dreams. You might ask yourself, am I limiting myself? Like, is this necessary in the same way? I don't know.
yeah,
That's what comes up for me, though. But
yeah,
I think so well said. I mean, in terms of all, this is bringing up some great discussion, I think, and
yeah,
thoughts.
absolutely. I just to add to your analysis here of the driving, I want to just emphasize the importance of, like, that's why talking about this and listening to these things and having them at the forefront of your mind is so important, is not to immediately change your subconscious patterns. It's to make the awareness easier. It's so that when the magnet does click into place or does hit center in your Canva presentation, you recognize it more and more and more. Because you're not always going to, right? But you want to recognize it. But then, I think this is the other such important piece, is having grace with yourself when you recognize it. You are not going to hate yourself into doing anything. And I did this just the other day. I had a thought. I forget even what it was, but I remember having the thought and then being like, God damn it, Reese. Like, we've worked on this. You know better. Like, why did that thought come up? Like, stop it. Just stop it. Get over this. And then I was like, holy shit. I just got so mean to myself. I just, like, berated and bullied myself in my head for a pattern that has been ingrained in me. I think it was something where, like, I had, like, a thought of self-doubt, and then I was so mad at myself for having that thought. And I'm like, Reese, this pattern has been you've been practicing self-doubt for 26 years. Like, maybe have some grace when you're trying to bring awareness to that. And maybe this is why you have self-doubt, is because when something like this comes up, the voice in your head says you're a piece of shit. What would it look like if when that thought comes up, it's like gentle parenting yourself and like the reparenting and work that we've talked about before and almost inner child work of like, oh, high thought, high self-doubt. You're actually really safe. You're safe right now. And it's okay to be scared. It's okay to have that feeling. But bravery is feeling the fear and doing it anyways. And we are actively going to choose X, whatever that means. And truly, like, sometimes I will say those words out loud to myself because I need to say them and I need to hear them to really like click in. And it takes like 10, 15 seconds. Sometimes do I feel like a loony person if someone's gonna be if I'm parked in a parking lot and someone walks past me and they see me talking to myself with my hands over my heart and my eyes closed? Maybe. However, you gotta do what you gotta do. And so just all that to say too, like
Yeah.
when you do begin this it's harder not to be upset with yourself, especially when it's something like racism and sexism, that it's like, these are the most abhorrent things, right? Like any sort of like ism. You don't want to have that. But again, hating yourself is not a psychologically powerful way to change it. You're just going to end up reinforcing these patterns of hate within who you are. And even if it's transferring the hate from other people to yourself, like, is that societally better? We could debate that and like what are the repercussions and ripple effects, but I'm like, I think the point is to minimize hate as much as possible. And that also means not hating yourself.
Yeah, you got to start there. I mean, how can you expect to love another person if you don't love yourself? How can you expect to have another person love you when you don't love yourself? And and yes, it is so important. And another question to add on to that that may help some people that I find useful, especially when it's like, oh, you're so dumb, or I hate you, oh, you're so awful, you're such a piece of shit, whatever. The BoJack Horseman monologue from season 4, which I think is
Yeah,
absolutely just so
it's
killer. Like
brilliant.
everyone should watch that monologue, because we no matter how much we all say it in one form or another, maybe not as extreme, but it's just stop for a second and just ask this question: Who is speaking right now? Who is having this thought? Is this my thought? Or how can I observe that I'm having this thought if I am this thought? So who is in fact the one thinking this thought? And I would argue, I mean, there's two possibilities. One is it's not you, it's an introjection from your parents, probably, or somebody in your life who, in Bojack's case, it was from his mother and his father. So, that he could hear those voices. And so oftentimes it's probably not your voice. It's probably the voice of somebody else. So that's number one. And even if it is your voice, I would question, is it just, are you saying this as a way to sort of flagellate yourself without actually wanting to address the thing? Because it's
Yeah.
very easy to like
Oh,
self whip
yeah.
your, oh, I'm a piece of shit, I'm a piece of shit, and it's almost like a psychic punishment, and it's genuine. I mean, you feel it. I mean, you hurt from it, but it's almost your way of absolving yourself of that, when that does nothing. Like, you haven't addressed the issue is, well, okay, there's no punishment there. You've done nothing wrong except allow society to take over who you are. Allow these other voices. All you've really done is allow this energy that exists out in the world, this racist, hateful energy, which is everywhere, to glom onto you a little bit. But it's not who
Well,
you are.
I think that is such an important thing too, that like even in the punishment, it's almost like separating the acknowledgement and the real work of changing. It's like, well, but I feel bad about it and I'm making myself feel bad about it. So I don't actually need to look at the underlying root cause of these patterns, and it perpetuates the pattern. It almost makes me think about like, this is a weird example, but I think you'll understand what I mean, where like if a boy like makes fun of a girl in school, like in middle school or whatever, and he gets home and her mom calls his parents and is like, hey, your son said this really shitty thing to my daughter. Just thought you should know, you know. And then the parents are like, you're grounded. Give me your phone or spank or, you know, whatever parents do that like could be this representation of flagellation, right? But are you going to go to the girl's house and apologize? Are you going to go back and make right and admit wrong to her? Or are you just going to sit grounded in your room? Which one is actually doing the repair work that allows us to heal and move forward? And I think that's true of exactly what you're talking about, right? That it's like, don't just ground yourself. That's actually letting yourself off the hook from doing the work too. Again, going
It
back
might
to the
be.
grace
It's
part
something to
being
watch out
important.
for.
Yeah.
It's like for all of this, it's stay in the middle of the lane. Like,
Mm,
don't go too far to the right. Avoid the twos. Don't go too far to the right. Don't go too far to the left. That's when you run off into a ditch. Like everything we say is a grain of salt. You take too much of it, and too much of a good thing is not a good thing. There's that is moderation in terms of. No, I mean again, racism at all should be stamped out. So, it's not
right.
like, oh, a little bit of racism is cool. But when it comes to dealing with yourself, grace and mercy should be the watchwords. I would say that you keep grace and mercy and goodness because again, believe that deep that yourself is good and
Well, yeah.
is pure. And so if you assume that, then ask who is asking. When you ask yourself who's really saying this, why am I really saying this? Do I really believe that? Ask yourself that question. Do I really believe this? If somebody else said this to me, how would I feel? Would I agree with this? Would
Yeah.
I get pissed? Like, how would I feel? All of but again, notice everything we're saying is just mindfulness. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
paying attention without judgment,
Right.
which is really what mindfulness is. It's just noticing. It's just, I noticed. It's awareness.
Yeah.
It's I am. Like
Yeah.
it's I am. And often naming these things is so useful too. Just saying, because a lot of times folks have difficulty, and men especially, can have difficulty even knowing what they're feeling. So simply to name it to yourself or write it down. Right now, I am feeling upset because I got cut off in traffic and I feel little. Whatever it is, I feel small. I feel like I don't matter. What Just by naming that feeling, writing it down, putting it down, you bring it from your amygdala to your prefrontal cortex. Now, does that fix anything? Well, no and yes. like by it doesn't fix it because it doesn't need to be fixed to begin with. It you brings it to your attention and you can decide what meaning you're going to take from that. Like this person cutting you off. With the moment you can take, oh, they just cut me off. It really means nothing about me. Like it's about that. Like, the meaning is what I'm making of it. I'm small. No, I'm
Right.
not small. Like I'm me. Like I'm no I'm no bigger or smaller than I was before I got cut off. I'm glad I
Yeah.
was paying attention so I didn't get in an accident. There's so many different ways you can respond to it. But
Absolutely.
um really, really, really good stuff. So another thing that I think that's a good transition because we talked about the stoicism and mental
Yeah.
health and things of that nature. So the man box, right? We talked about that, and given what we're the manosphere and the man box, this hyper traditional men, right? And I suspect that the 33% plus that are all about violence would fall into this category and stuff. So there's an interesting paradigm at work here, which makes sense when you think about it, I think, and that is it goes back to the prison of our own making. Hyper traditional
Sure.
men are about two times roughly twice as likely to say that they have a sense of purpose, which is good, right? I mean, having a sense of purpose, when you have a sense of purpose, it's easier to do things. You're motivated, all of these things. When you don't have a sense of purpose, it's harder in general. However, they're three times more likely to have considered self-harm or suicide. So that's a double-edged sword, right? You have there.
I Yeah. That is I'm so sorry. I'll let
No,
you finish.
go. I want to hear. No, no, no. I'm done. Go.
So, one thing that I've recently like pretty much solidified, well, not solidified. I want everything that I do in my work to be constantly evolving and like taking a new information, of course. But something that I've recently like kind of settled on in my work when it comes to purpose and making meaning is a new definition of purpose, because I believe that us as a society have been sold a lie about what purpose is. And in my work, I call this false purpose. And I would argue that that is the purpose that these men are reporting to feel. Maybe not all of them, but false purpose. I'm like, actually, I have my little notebook right here. Let me flip
Do
over
it.
to it so I make sure I get my precise definition. Um, okay, yes. So false purpose causes anxiety, first and foremost. Like when you think of the word purpose, it's like, oh, I need to figure it out. What does that mean to me? Like, oh my gosh, what's the meaning of my life? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, very like existential crisis feeling. Like if you hear the word purpose and your stomach drops, you're thinking about false purpose. It keeps you isolated because you think you're in your own head, the only one experiencing these things, and that it's something you have to figure out on your own. It stays fixed or stagnant. Like in your life, you have one purpose. Like, my purpose is to be a dad and provide for my family. Period. End of sentence. I not to undermine the value of being a dad or taking care of your family, but every human being is so much more than just what they are to other people, is so much more than just this one role they play. And it can't just be this one thing. And the role of being a dad is going to change over the course of not just 18 years, but from the moment you have a baby until the moment you hopefully pass away before your child. False purpose also says you have to be productive with your purpose. You need to generate something. You need to make something out of it. If you have this purpose, you should make a business out of it. You should generate and produce, and it tends to also like turn the wheel of the economy and capitalism in this false purpose that we've been socialized to understand. And it's the thing that people have been told makes their life meaningful, that's what gives you worth. And that's why it causes so much anxiety, because it's like, well, my life doesn't matter unless I figure out what this purpose is and I do it. I check the box of whatever that purpose is. But then I would argue, if you have this false sense of purpose that you can actually achieve one day, that you can actually check the box of, what's the point in continuing to live if you've lost your purpose? So through my research, I've developed a definition of true purpose that
Love to hear it.
is, one, I think, helpful, more fruitful for human beings to think about, but actually more accurate to how human beings who report feelings of fulfillment, joy, connection, and just like general healthiness, actually how they experience purpose. Instead of it causing anxiety, it makes you curious. When you have an interest or you see something new, you want to ask why and chase it, not shrink away from this question. Instead of it making you isolated, it actually causes connection, because when you feel purposeful, this is like one of the most overwhelming findings in my research and conversations with people, is that when you feel good with yourself, every single person then wants to give back, then wants to help other people once you figured this out for yourself. And true purpose makes you want to connect. Instead of it being stagnant, it's ever evolving with you. It changes as you change, it grows. It exists outside of value. So if you want to make a business out of your purpose, great. If you want to have a job and you also, that's just to make money and you have this other hobby, great. Like, it doesn't have to be the thing that is productive in your life. And the most important thing is that true purpose owns your inherent worth. It starts from the fact that I am already worthy, I am already good enough, and therefore I can trust my curiosity. I can trust my intuition. I can follow the true north that I am being guided towards. And so this true purpose is actually a steering, a guiding in your life that kind of similar to you talking about the in Canva, when you put something in the center, it kind of clicks into place, but in a more positive sense, hopefully. But I talk about it kind of like true north, where if you're in the woods and you're trying to walk north to get out of the woods, you're not going to be walking fully in a straight line the whole time. You're going to kind of veer off, and it's like, oh, actually, I need to go back this way a little bit, and then you may overcorrect. But every time you pass through true north, you get this little ping. You get this little frequency, and it's like, what was that? And people will call it like whispers, glimmers, intuition, downloads, like gut feelings, instincts, like whatever you want to call that. It's your ping of like true north purpose. So, all that to say, these men who are reporting, I have a strong purpose, but then it is that same group of people who very clearly aren't feeling this sense of fulfillment and satisfaction and joy and connection in their life. It's because of this false purpose that keeps you honestly small. It keeps you a cog in the machine, and it keeps you isolated and anxious and not knowing what it is. But you found your purpose, so you should be good, right? It's not if it's this false purpose.
Yeah, I love that. That is gold, Jerry, gold. Yeah, for real. What I heard, and I think it applies in this particular example of this that we
Sure.
shared, these stats, is when your thought of purpose, or what you believe your purpose to be, which may be no purpose at all, right? Like you're
Right.
but when that is misaligned with your true purpose, that creates discomfort. And I would argue when that gets loud enough and the discomfort gets loud enough, that's why self-harm and that the psychic pain of the energetic pain of being so far out of misalignment, and even worse, I mean, in some senses, it's better to not have alignment at all. Like, what do they say? If you're lost in the woods, just fucking sit there and wait for rescue. Don't fucking wander around.
Yeah.
But what we're basically saying is not only are you not following true north, but you think you are. And so you may be going in this, this is to me the equivalent of somebody, the TV shows where somebody, probably real life, where somebody drove into a lake because they were following the GPS
Yeah.
instructions.
Or
That's
it's
what
like
comes up for me. Yeah.
seeing the oasis in the desert, thinking that you're reaching salvation, and you get there and it's like it was just a mirage. It was false, because we're all very much, especially in the West. Of course, this is we're both in the United States, so that's coloring all of our conversations. But the American dream, white picket fence, like, you work hard, you get the good grades to get into the good college, to get the good job, to get the good family that you're supposed to want, to provide for them, take care of them, and that's what's going to give you satisfaction. And then you get the promotion in the job, and then one day you get rich, and then one day you're happy, like you've done it, you've made it suddenly. It's like this pride, this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that you've been sold, but no one actually really knows what that pot of gold is. Everyone talks about it, but no one says what it is. And I don't think anyone's ever actually found it. And that's why we have, in some part, megalomaniacs like, I would argue, Donald Trump, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, that even though they have immense amounts of power, still are pushing, because you can never reach this mythical pot of gold. It does not exist. But if you think it does, if you keep seeing the oasis just a little bit further down, well, I'll just step on a few more people. I'll just make a few more sacrifices. I'll just sacrifice my values and ethics just a little bit more to finally get there. But then on your deathbed, it's like, did you do it? Like, you never will. You never will.
Now you can never, when you're if you're misaligned with your purpose, in particular, misaligned versus perhaps, unclear as to your purpose. But if you're
Right. Right.
misaligned, what you'll find, you find exactly what you see. That is, nothing is ever enough, because you can't get enough of what you don't really want. Like, Elon Musk doesn't want money. it doesn't matter how much money he gets. He thinks he does, so he's misaligned. He thinks he wants money,
Yep.
and that's what and so he does, because that's his reality. There's a part of him that it needs money so much that feel like, and here's the thing, we get so mad at these people, even Trump. I mean, who I'm not a fan of, as you well know, but it's just a part, and it's this energetic form, and this energetic form wants to live so badly. So
Right.
this part of Elon that needs money so bad, this part of Donald Trump that needs people to respect me, I'm powerful, I'm important, I'm the best there, whatever, all the shit that he tweets all the time, like is just this part of him that's so scared and just can't. And so when you look at it that way, it's so sad. And there was like a brutal takedown of Elon Musk by who was it? It was Billie Eilish, I think. Basic, and then
Yeah.
but then somebody else. Well, Billie Eilish kind of went on, put all the billionaires on like notice, I guess, with her, like, what's wrong with you guys? You have $1 billion and you're not doing shit, basically. Uh, but then somebody, I forget who it was. Oh, I got to remember. We'll have to find out. Came in and just eviscerated Elon in terms of like, here's a guy who has all of this stuff. He can post about whatever he wants. He could talk about art. He could talk about all these other things, and he never does. He just talks about, all this, like, this childish crap, basically. And it just shows what it's, Now, again, she was going for insulting and did a very nice job of it, because he immediately then came back and tried to post, oh, I'm cultured. Look at all the culture I have. And it's like, dude, like, you're not. You're basic. Um,
You're
as Eleanor
basic.
Shellstrop would say, yeah,
Yeah.
basic. Um, but the fact is it's true, and it's sad. Like, that's the thing. Can you get past the anger and the resentment? Oh, this guy's so, you hate these people but they want you to hate them. You're giving them energy, man. Like, that's what I'm realizing. The angrier you get, you're just feeding the pendulum.
That's
You're
so
just
true.
feeding them. And it's not them. You think it's them. It's not. They're being controlled. It's this energy controlling them. You're feeding that energy. Whether you hate it or you love it, you're feeding, you're giving your energy to that. Whether it's a brief moment, you've energetically, metaphysically transferred some of your energy, your power, to his purpose, to that life form's, this energetic form's purpose. So do you want to do that? Like, I mean, you can, but when you start to realize, when you get all pissed, whatever it is, whether you're pissed at a person, whether you're pissed at a party, whether you're pissed at a circumstance, whether you're pissed at that person cutting you off, by reacting to it, and this is the stoic thing. No, in some senses, right? When you react, you are just giving your energy to that thing, that object, that energetic thing that just happened. You are giving away your power. You are giving away your energy. So why do that? Like, if you can start to frame, we do it because our energy, that's what we do. And these energy forms want it. They require it. That's what they take it out of you in some senses. Like, they almost demand a response. But when you don't respond, immediately there's a surge and you may see more of it, but eventually it stops. Because I mean, to a large degree, because once it sees you can't be bothered by it, it stops trying, in some senses, so
Right.
hard. Because, and you've dealt with it. And so view it as leveling up. Like, view it as, I mean, maybe this is my neurodivergent brain, but view it as a game. Like, we had talked about, instead of getting all hard and mad at yourself and all down, I'm such a piece of shit, I had these no, notice it. And you get a little bit of that experience bar filling up to, hey, I'm leveling up on being aggravated by this particular thing, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Donald Trump, whether it's, whatever, whether it's the other side, whether you're big MAGA and Nancy Pelosi gets in your feels big time. Like, you're just giving her energy, dude. Like, you know, you're just giving that feminist energy. Like, so bring on the hate mail, guys. Like, give us more hate mail. You're just really feeding our energy, and that's great, because what we want to do is good, or positive, and that's my purpose, is to piss you guys off, to give us more energy. Maybe, I don't know. Uh,
Yeah.
but
I do
yeah,
I I do want to highlight, like, to this, I think the way Billie Eilish did this, I was very impressed with, in the sense that not only was she talking about something that I think is important, but she wasn't just being angry, right? She then donated, I want to say either 10 or 20% of her net worth to the organization is going to, I will link information in the description box down below. It's been a while since I've researched this, but she literally put her money where her mouth is, right? And to me, that was alchemy in like the highest form, because again, when you notice you're getting angry, when you notice that this energy is forming, energy cannot be created or destroyed. So channel it into a way that is actually not feeding this negative energy form that is greed, that is selfishness, that is oppression, that is whatever it is that you're trying to fight. And use that energy of anger, alchemize it into something that feels more expansive, right? Instead of going on Twitter and doing a Twitter rant, how can you, I don't know, look at volunteering at your local food pantry? Like, I don't know. I'm struggling with coming up with a good example there, but I hope the point is clear in the sense that it's like, it's not to say that the anger you feel is invalid, and it's not to say that being upset and mad is wrong. Like, that energy is so powerful. Righteous indignation and anger is what founds movements. But the reason why these movements are movements is because they take that anger and they do something with it. They don't let it stay anger. They literally energetically alchemize it into progress, into expansion. So it's not to say that, like, oh, your anger is bad. It's to say, fucking use it, because you can, it's so powerful. It's powerful. And just letting that be anger at someone else is giving that anger to someone else, giving that power away, exactly like you just said. But reclaim it and own it. And it's okay. It's okay to be angry and vent and dislike these people. I think that is more than justified. But I think your point stands that it's like, okay, now that we've acknowledged this feeling, bring it into the prefrontal cortex. Again, like we were talking about earlier, what do I want to choose to do with it? That is, I think, the energy that so inspired this false purpose versus true purpose, because ultimately the false purpose is grounded in, I need to rely on all of these external things to inform what it is that my worth is based on, what it is that my life means, what it is that is my legacy, that is fulfillment, that is actually the meaning of my life. And true purpose says, no, 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 no. That is mine. I am. And what does that change in how you approach life when you start with yourself as the source, not as the reaction to all of these other things? This portion of the conversation, we started with talking about how men who, I think it was our husbands and fathers, report feeling this sense of purpose, but then struggle with their mental health at a higher rate. And I think that that's just an example of exactly what we're talking about. And I want to be careful not to undermine the difficulty and validity of men's mental health struggles at all. But I think what we're trying to do here, even though oftentimes we are like poking at men, ultimately is to the benefit of men and men's mental health, because what we're actually trying to do is create a space for you to be as expansive and whole as possible. And that, I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with that, but it's like, that's just, I think, a good example of exactly what we're talking about and how important it is to pay attention to these things, because it's not just, I think it's so easy for these concepts to be like, oh yeah, well, easy for you to say, right? But actually, it is concepts like these that got me out of that mindset, that did save my life in deciding to own my life, that I am. And that is where I am starting from. And even if that begins with nihilism and then you make meaning out of it, that is literally what saved my life. Like this has real world consequences, as perfectly exampled by this paper, this study.
Yeah, so true. And that's, I mean, there is a mental health crisis for men. And whether or not it's of our own, I mean, it is of their own making, it isn't of their own making. It's of all of our makings, frankly. And putting blame or poking finger, poking pointing fingers, putting blame, trying to solve who caused this is silly. It's this, and it's all of it and none of it. But I mean, just some stats, just some key 2/3, 63%, a little under 2/3 of men believe no one cares whether men are okay these days, quote unquote. Uh, and I say, well, so to that I say, well, we do. You know, you may hate on us, but I care if men are okay. I know you care if men are okay. So around half of men and women say no one knows me, no one really knows who I am. Which, I mean, again, that makes sense. It's a widespread disconnection. 2/3 of men report negative mental health symptoms in just the last 2 weeks. So, you know, you're sitting in class, look to the left, look to the right. Both of the people on your sides are probably having, mental health problems if you're not. If you're not, the other two people sitting next to you are. That's what that would mean, in tongue in cheek, of course. And this is, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, feeling of failure. Almost a half of men reported thoughts of self-harm in the last 2 weeks. Like over almost half, 45%. Nearly one, and then I mean, here again, this speaks. Now, this is on men to some degree. Nearly 1/3 rarely or never go to the doctor. 1/3 of men. Only 8% seek medical care most or all of the time. Uh, so and so this is medical care. Forget about therapy. Forget about mental health care, which is viewed as being broken. And so to me, there's just such this huge gap between what we're hearing and what we're, as men, what we hear and then but what we're rewarded for. So culture says talk about your feelings, but oftentimes when we do, it feels like it falls on deaf ears. And so we're rewarded for stoicism. I mean, the fact is 3/4 of men say they solve problems on their own. And 60% say, 3 out of 5 say they have to look out for themselves, but no one else has their back. Despite the fact that they claim they want connection, that they need connection. I mean, we heard that. So where is the disconnect? Um,
Yeah, I do think that there is some sort of disconnect here, because I think I'm of two minds in that that's not okay, right? Like, men should not be feeling like that, and everyone deserves to feel seen and understood and healthy and well. I also think there are some contributing factors that maybe aren't being discussed that do need to be a part of this conversation, in that if you want support, you have to be supportive. If you want a friend, you have to be a friend. If you want someone to care about your mental health, you have to care about their mental health. And not to victim blame by any means. And I think there are absolutely a lot of men who are just suffering and are not perpetrating any of this harm. However, I will also say that when you go online and you see someone talk about men's mental health, it's usually a woman, and the comments are horrible comments from other men. When a man talks about his mental health, the comments are full of men calling him a pussy, a coward, grow up, man up. And when you do see men talk about mental health, often it is in response to a woman talking about a very valid experience that she has had, saying, I had this really hard experience and it's not okay. And then men will say, well, think about men's mental health. Women always want to complain, think about men's mental health. And to me, that's a separate issue. That's not what we're talking about right now. Is that important? Yes. Do we need to be advocating for that and as women, be allies and supportive of men who are seeking support and seeking help, uh and maybe a callous way to say this, like positively reward the emotional vulnerability we see. Yes, absolutely. But also, you can't do that in a space that is simultaneously invalidating someone else's experience. And you can't do it at inappropriate times, right? I think also maybe part of it is that men don't have practice with this. And there are times where, being vulnerable is not oversharing. Um, and so I don't know. Again, I'm just of two minds in that absolutely this is a dangerous issue that clearly it's affecting everyone, men and women. Like, the male loneliness epidemic is everywhere. And there is some sort of disconnect that is happening, and we need to get to whatever that is. And I think part of it has to be both parties kind of meeting each other in the middle. But I think because there's such a history of, you have never listened to me, you have never supported me, you have never made me feel heard or safe or anything at all. And actually, your bros are the ones that are telling you you're bad for doing this, not me. Um, it makes it hard. It makes it hard when a woman then says, well, I'm struggling with this, and men then say, well, what about me? It's like, well, what about you? I would love to see, I would absolutely support any sort of men's mental health work that someone's going to do, but I don't see that happening independently. I don't see that being organized. I don't know. Maybe, and again, as a man, maybe this is extremely invalidating for me to say, and that's certainly not what I'm trying to do, because, again, I want to emphasize and underline, like, this is a problem for all of us, for everyone. No human being should be feeling like this. But also, I think the ways that men are coping with it thus far are clearly not effective. And yeah, I'll stop talking because I don't want to, again, I don't want to be invalidating, but also I think there's a lot of other stuff going on here too.
Yeah, I mean, to me, as you were talking, as I was reflecting, what really popped for me, particularly from a neurodivergent lens, is the double empathy problem. Like, there is different languages are being spoken here. In some, now, again, are there bad behaviors? Yes, but I think on average, I mean, it's a distribution, right? It's a bell curve. Like, on your extremes, you're always going to have fringes, but fundamentally, boys are taught the language of independence, fixing, and problem solving. Like, that is what makes you an adequate man. Growing up, girls are taught connection, empathy, and emotional tuning. And so, to me, this is kind of like how, it's the same double empathy problem writ differently than neurodivergent folks have with neurotypical folks. And it's, you know, it's the misunderstanding goes so both ways in some very real situation. And so this is a shared difficulty. Um, but we're not coming together to solve it is kind of the problem. And so I think we're, in some senses, each trying to solve the other like, we're trying to fix the other problem rather than fixing ourselves, I think, in some ways as well. Uh,
Mm,
I mean, because the difficulty is shared. Just
yeah,
it's women misunderstand men's silence as disinterest when it may very, very well be just the way they regulate. Men often misunderstand women's emotions as escalation when it may, maybe connection in some place. And if we could learn each other's dialect, then connection does skyrocket. So, and it's just energy, right? These energy aren't able to talk to one another. It's like they're bouncing off around each other. And so,
right.
what would be the practical takeaway? Well, again, it's about stopping. It's about changing reframing the question. It's not about who's right. It's about what's the language, like. But we think we understand each other. That's the problem. it would be one thing if we just literally didn't understand each other's languages, but the words are the same, but the meanings are different. So it's like we live in alternate realities to some degree where the words we say don't mean the same to each other. And maybe we need a glossary. I don't know. I mean, but men are not emotionally clueless, no matter what we may, no matter what
Right.
it may seem. And women aren't too emotional. I think we can agree with both of that. We're just two human beings raised with different emotional grammar in some senses,
Yeah.
trying to connect across culture. So, you know, that again, I don't know who this is for or what this is for, but this is where we went.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stick with
I
it.
think no, one thing that's coming up for me too is that like as we become a more I the word that came to mind is enlightened, but I don't really
I
like
know I hate
that
that word.
word, but like a more progressive, expansive, enlightened, aware society, I think that these process-oriented skills are being in some ways valued more and more. I say in some ways because of course we're seeing mass defunding of the arts and like AI that is being offloaded to for a lot of soft skills. So grain of salt there. But in terms of connection and in terms of human relationship, I do think we're moving as a society in a direction that values, um, at least in the online sphere, I don't think this is necessarily true of everyone, but that values connection and pause and over communication if it's necessary and being more process oriented. And so, all that to say, I wonder if part of it is in this like men feel like they're not valued enough or men feel like they're not respected anymore. I wonder if part of it is because there is this shift towards well the skills that you were naturally raised with, that you were naturally socialized and culturalized to think are important and good, are no longer as important and as good as you were told they would be. And women were socialized in a way that now those skills are being lauded as more important and more good. And again, I don't think that's wrong. I actually am really excited that we're moving as a society in a direction that is a little bit more emotionally intelligent and connection based and process oriented. I do think that that is more psychologically healthy. However, I can see how it would just be, I mean, again, it's the betrayal of patriarchy, right? It's so frustrating to be told this is how you cultivate safety and security and connection. And then you get to the end of the line and it's like, why does no one want? It's like, you told me the rules of the game, but then the game changed. Like, it feels like a bait and switch. And so I can understand why men feel like they've been baited and switched. But again, that's why, like, the things we're talking about are so important. As this awareness piece changes, and I completely agree with you that it does go back to grace. Not to say that anyone needs to have a relationship with anyone. I want to make that clear that it's like women are not forced to educate men in this way, and you are not forced to or obligated to be in a relationship with men by any means. However, if you want to be in a relationship with anyone, I think it stands to reason you should probably meet each other in the middle and understand the tools that you and your partner are working with, like the frameworks that you're working from. And even though I think a lot of the callouts of straight white men are necessary and important, I think we can also see why people get defensive. Like anyone who's been told, you suck and you're the problem, it doesn't feel good. Now, does that mean you have the right to get angry and mad and go off the deep end? No, those are your feelings that you need to deal with. And if someone hurt your feelings by saying that, then you need to have an adult, mature conversation with them about it. But I think the nuance is maybe being pressed out of this a little bit.
Oh yeah, I think you're totally pressed out, and it doesn't. I see a parallel almost in from like what men are the shift that men are experiencing from a their value perspective because I mean, there is a shift. I mean, without a doubt, the Stoic, the solutions focused, world is different now than it was, say, in the greatest
Well,
generation. Let's
even
say,
women used to need you for owning property, opening a bank account, having money. Now we don't.
right?
We don't
Exactly.
need a man for that. I think there's few thoughts. I I agree. I think that it is about this meeting in the middle. One thing that I want to couch that in, though, is this importance of when you meet it, the importance of, like, yes, we want societally to make a change, but I think we're seeing more and more, like, women not needing to be in a relationship, women not wanting to be in a relationship. And if you're not raising kids and if you're not wanting to engage with men, like, that's a choice you're allowed to make. And I think that in a certain sense, you can't opt out of this because it is a cultural collective movement that's happening. But in another sense, you can. So I think finding the role you play in that is important. And not like, if you find yourself already in a relationship, I do think you have more of a duty to the people that you are committed to, and especially if you're a parent, like raising children with knowledge and intention of these things. But also I do think that, like, just because men are lonely and are experiencing this does not mean that women have to meet you in the middle so that you are in a relationship, right? But if the woman wants to be in a relationship and is opting into that work, then yes, that's when we can meet in the middle. So I would say, like, if you truly want to meet in the middle, like, men, start by being a friend to each other. And one thing that actually came up a lot in the comments on one of our clips, Dennis, that did really well, that I thought was interesting, was women saying in this work, like, when you hear men talking about, like, well, what about men's mental health? I'm not seeing anyone do anything about that. The women then responding and being like, you can do something about it. Why are you waiting for a woman to do that work for men's mental health? Women are organizing with women. Women are organizing around feminism, around intersectional feminism, and supporting each other. If there's a problem affecting your community, yeah, cool, fix it. I'll be there to support you. But is that also mirroring a pattern of men waiting around for women to do the emotional labor for them because they don't understand? And again, to your point, is a lot of that socialized in that they don't know how to do that emotional labor? Yes. And is there some, like, learning that needs to be done there? Absolutely. And therefore that comes with teaching and educating too. But in order to be a good student, you have to be open, you have to feel safe to learn, you have to listen. And when it's really easy to, like we were saying earlier, get angry when someone points out something wrong or a flaw. But I think part of being a good student is when you get a 60 back on your paper saying, whoa, I really thought this was a good paper. What happened? You go into office hours and you sit down with your teacher and you talk about it. You don't say, well, fuck you,
Yeah, this
teacher.
teacher,
How
yeah,
dare
this
you?
obviously an
This
idiot,
is the
didn't
best I
like
could
me.
do.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And again, I want to reiterate, like, it is the socialization of all of it, but there is just such a need to pause and like we've been saying throughout the whole episode, like, come back to the mindfulness, come back to the awareness, and then choose who it is that you are, your I am. Choose that, because your fear is not your I am. Your self-doubt is not your I am. Your defensiveness, your anger, your self-doubt, your not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy, that is not your I am. They're parts that are there to teach you a lesson, to give you messages so that you can learn and understand and grow, but it is all of our human duties to then choose who I am. And I think that's the pause that we're really needing to see. Um yeah. Is there anything else in the study as we kind of come to the end that you want to make sure we really get to and don't miss? Of course there's a bunch of stuff in here that are really interesting, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, there's
anything
a lot of
else?
stuff we didn't. I mean, honestly, we could probably do a whole nother podcast on just the other stuff we missed. But a couple of other thoughts that if people are interested in, we certainly could dive into more. I don't, but I think there is some interesting conversation around this sort of the online growth of the manosphere, this culture around big masculinity sort of thing, gender grievances, and a quote from Will Adolphi from this report was, "The manosphere, as he calls it, isn't the problem; it's the symptom. The real issue is the cultural void." And so I think there's some
Yes.
interesting things there in terms of what we could talk about. Also, just love and dating. So a lot of many again the many men are just they're giving up on, and women are giving up on relationships. You point, we have the other article from Vogue talking about that. 1 in 4 men believe no one will ever fall in love with them, and that jumps to 36%, so more than 1 in 3 for the younger folks, the younger guys. 56% of men say it's too difficult to meet a partner, says 60, and 62% say women expect too much of men in relationships. And then around 15% of men and women have engaged with a virtual boyfriend, girlfriend. Um, and more than the here
That's
yeah, that's
shocking.
shocking, and here's what's interesting about that. More than 2/3 say their virtual partner understands them better than anyone in real life and won't be unfaithful. Sounds like an AI girlfriend too, but, oh, yeah, that is AI, virtual. Oh, they mean virtual in terms of AI. Okay, I was reading it wrong, actually. I had totally misread that,
Oh,
actually.
no, 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 but that's of course it understands you better than anyone else. It is literally just a mirror.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like it's so of course, like you said, there's so much more there to unpack and get to, and the
how
love and
funny.
dating aspect too. And I think that there is a distinction but in the conversation we're having between like, okay, what does this how does this bear on love and dating versus how does this bear like collectively as a society? Like those are two different things in my mind with how you want to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it just exposes I think our conversation today just shows the complexities we're dealing with here. And
Yeah.
again, just from my perspective, everything is middle of, don't don't go off on the twos. Everything we've talked about, there's exceptions. Like we have to generalize, because otherwise you're talking word salad. Like, well, there are some people, of course, not every, at some point, it sounds ridiculous, but is there anything we've said that, or anything I've said, I should say, that comes off as thoughtless or simplify over some? Understand, I get the nuance, and
Yeah.
my frustration is that there is so much nuance, and it's very
Right.
challenging to. And so I guess, again, I always come back to what one thing can you take away from this, and again, it does come back to mindfulness of everything we've talked about. Just notice what you're thinking. Just take and ask, who is thinking this? Is this really me? Does this belong to me? If you just do that one simple thing, everything we've talked about today, you know, it's you start to see solutions you start to get answers to these questions. Solutions appear when you just take a beat and pause and say, is this what I think it is? Does this make sense? Why am I thinking? Just by taking that moment to notice. So I think with that, and men and women out there, relationships are hard. Like, it is not easy, and but keep up, and do try, and be good to each other. And I don't know, I feel like Jerry Springer, but uh I grew
No,
up
but
watching that in college, so try to be good to each other, is
yeah.
my final word.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. And I agree with you that the nuance can be really frustrating too, because it's like you want a clean answer. The human brain always wants a clean, neat answer, and it is just not that. So, yeah. try to be good to each other, and also try to be good to yourself as you're working through all of these things. And you're recognizing, again, this goes for men and women and our non-binary friends, like when you recognize something that feels unlovely within you, like have grace for that. And it is through loving that part that you can begin to heal it. And I do think that it ultimately starts with owning your own self-worth inherently. And that makes it much easier to then connect with other people across the board. So yeah, as always, let us know what you think down in the comments. Of course, the full study will be linked down below, as well as everything else we mentioned, so that you can go check it out for yourself, like look into it and do your own research as always. But thank you all so very much for being here, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Bow Down is a weekly podcast from the Cohere Collective that explores esoteric and empowered feminism.
Please subscribe to Bow Down wherever you may be listening. And if you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a like, a 5-star rating, and a review. And if there's anyone you think would enjoy this episode, or maybe just needs to hear it, please share it.
If you want to stay up to date on all things Bow Down, you can follow the Cohere Collective on any social media platform at the Cohere Collective, and check out other content and offerings at www.thecoherecollective.com.
If you're interested in working with Reese to find and pursue your purpose, I encourage you to head to www.thecoherecollective.com/life-coaching.
If you're interested in working with Dennis to shed your mask and embrace your desires, you can email Dennis at dennis@theheartstoybox.com.
A huge thank you to Jack Corbett for Bow Down's music. You can find him on Instagram at j.corbe. Thank you all for joining us today. We're so glad you're here.
And as always, we hope you feel like you are living more coherently. And until next time, love.